Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so glad for those who've come back. And if you haven't, if you're new and you missed last week and you didn't get a chance to hear the recording, I'm going to do a very, very small, and I'm going to speak quickly because I realized last week I said that this class would be shorter, but it looks that it will even be longer. So let's get going. Again, the title of the whole four-part series is Zenith or Nadir. David's Batsheva imbroglio. This particular part is called Part 2, The Offensive. And I want to start again by thanking both Elaine and Rabbi Karobkin, because instead of the iceberg theme this week, it's going to be the beautiful sunflower face theme, because they all do whatever they do with Besever Panim Yafot. So thank you for doing that, both of you. And thank you for allowing me to come and learn Torah with the congregation. Zenith or nadir, just the technical words. Zenith is the high point, nadir is the low point, and we're going to decide that on the fourth class. Maybe we won't decide it. Nobody can really decide it, but we're going to try. Then imbroglio is the question that we all have. What does that word mean? So we decided that word, we didn't decide, Cambridge Dictionary decided for us, that word is an unwanted, difficult, and confusing situation full of troubles and problems. Okay. Now, going back, I'm going to spend like maybe 3-4 slides on what we did last week a little bit. And this we did not do last week, but Aviva raised a good question, a good idea, which is that this was all orchestrated by Hashem. And of course, we believe that about our lives, but we discussed then at that point about, what's the balance between believing that Hashem does everything and that we have our own agency. So I picked this out of the Sanhedrin 107, Kuf Zayin. And there's a lot of more discussion of David over there, and there's many other Mefarshim and Midrashim, but I picked this one to address her point slightly. So I'm going to read the English just for the sake of time, and just understand that when it has the bold in the English, that's referring to the Hebrew, and then they fill in with the non-bolded words to explain the bolded words. So here we go. Rabba taught, what is the meaning of that which is written? For I am ready to stumble, and my pain is always before me. This is from Tehillim, Lamed Chet. Batsheva, daughter of Eliam, was designated as fit for David from the 6 days of creation. Rava interprets that the term Latzela is referring to Eve, who was taken from the side of the Tzela of Adam, the first man, and explains that she was destined for him, just as Eve was destined for Adam. But she came to him through pain. And likewise, the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, Batsheva, daughter of Eliam, was designated as fit for David, but he partook of her unripe before the appointed time. David would have ultimately married her in a permitted manner after the death of Uriah. So the idea here is, if you go back to the pasuk at the top, Ki ani latzela nachon, I don't like their translation, but who am I to not like their translation? I just think it makes more sense just in the simple meaning of, because I, David, Letzela, referring to my zivug, my partner that should have been from creation, i.e. like Adam and Chava, she came from his Tzela, as they describe there. Nachon, that is the correct and right thing to be, but mechovi, machovi negdi tamin, the pain that I have to endure for the rest of my life because I came about it the wrong way, I took her as unripe fruit, as Rabbi Yishmael, the school of Rabbi Yishmael says. So therefore, because of that, I endure pain the rest of my life. So we can say that, this is making an excuse because everything was meant to be. I mean, they were meant to be partners. So therefore, maybe everybody worked out well. David did what he was supposed to do in order for her to become a partner. But we can't look at it like that. We have to say, no, he did sins to create the situation that was the right situation, but at the wrong time. So similarly, I'm sure that there's none of us on this Zoom call who are in this situation. And if we are in this situation, we probably don't have Ruach HaKodesh to know that this is our zivug or whatever. And therefore, we have to understand that we cannot go out and sin, even if you think that you have Ruach HaKodesh and know that it's the right thing to do, just like David, this is a lesson for us all, you're not able to do that. And anything else you choose to do, if it's not exactly this situation, you still shouldn't do it, because the ends don't justify the means don't justify the ends. I got that right. So therefore, we should make sure that even if we think we know what's right, and whatever situation we're in, and I think this is a really great lesson for this whole story, right? We have to say, we have to stand back and do what's right. And God will help it work out in the end, which is the last part there, the unripe fruit. Okay, that was a long discussion of this. Let's move on. Some points from last week. I'm not sure exactly who made which points. So I'm just going to say that Aviva, Rachel, Elaine L. Some people made these points. I'm sorry if I missed you out. You're welcome to pipe up if I'm not saying them correctly. So the question was asked, is it a love story? Well, she went home. And then if she wasn't pregnant, the question we have to ask is, would she ever have come back? Would they see each other ever again? So maybe it wasn't such a love story. These are from comments afterwards when people had gone home already, and some things that were said to me. The question is, Batsheva knew she was fertile, right? She was monitoring her own cycles. So therefore, maybe she, if we're saying she had agency and made this plan, then just then she chose to be on the roof, right? It wouldn't have mattered if she was on the roof when it wouldn't have come to anything. She was bold enough to tell the king, because it was her plan all along, despite the fact that she would be killed, right? So so that's the question, right? Because she could have been killed as easily as anyone else. Text outlines every step of David's. At any point, he could have stopped. So that's why I think the text goes step by step. This is, he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this, because at any point he could have had regret or had hesitation and said, no, that's wrong. I shouldn't be doing that. He had other women. So therefore, the title of the conquest, I think, was a good one, because he seemed to want this woman. And again, at the beginning, we discussed how he should have been like a melech, conquering other things, but now he was conquering this woman. And again, she's called Hayisha many times, and not so much Batsheva, other than to identify who she was and that she was the wife of Uriah. And we talked a little bit about the power imbalance, because that's how it is. And her culpability, we'll talk about that when we talk about the punishment. And if she wasn't so culpable, then she shouldn't be punished so much. So now review. We think David was culpable because of a few terminologies. So as we said just now, he should have been like kings going out to war, but instead he was sending malachim, messengers, which was not an activity worthy of a king. He was Me'al Hagag, so he was sort of just relaxing and scoping out the situation. And we said, Halo zot Batsheva. Either he said that or somebody told him that she was Batsheva. But again, I think the word halo means that he was ruminating. He was thinking that to himself. And we'll see why I think that in a minute, not a minute, in a few minutes. Nevertheless, even if he did it gently, he still took her. It was his initiative. She would not have walked into the castle and initiated this whole program because she just doesn't have that kind of agency, even though she might be beautiful. And then it says, Batashav el Beita, so she went back to her home. And that sort of also indicates that David wanted her for one purpose and one purpose alone. Mitigating those points are the factor that David looked, we read a Malbim, I think it was, who said that he went and sought out the information of whether or not she'd been given a get, or even a get al tanai by her husband before he went to war. And that the bonus is that she was also not in nida, so that he wouldn't have that sin compounded upon adultery. Although I don't even understand why that would be a problem if you're already committing adultery. Next, we asked the question of, did Batsheva have a plan? Was she at all involved? And there are people, just like we read in Sanhedrin, that also say that, yes, she did have a plan. She saw in Ruach HaKodesh that she would be a factor in David's life in terms of having a son that would be king, etc. Or she wanted to be married to a very, very holy man, and she saw David as that. So therefore, she created this whole plan for herself. And we said that she picked the time to go on the roof and was bathing there so that he would see her. V'tavo elav, that when it came to it, she didn't wear her like a dressing gown and fuzzy slippers. She put on her little black dress and her stilettos, and she went over to the castle, right? Veishkavima, the terminology we looked at last week was that it was a more willing union than it was rape, let's say. V'himit kadeshet mituata, again, if she was not in nida, so that was, she had planned that so that she would get pregnant. And then v'tishlach v'taged is also a wording of agency, that she had this plan. She sent her own messengers as he sent messengers, and the result was what he was notified of the problem, and he did something for it. Okay, now we're going back to this part, the part of the offensive, and I'm going to try to slow down now because it's now a new material. We're going to start with this idea, and I'm sure you've all heard this saying. It's, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And I am sure that some of you have an idea of who wrote that. Probably somebody knows exactly who wrote that, but let's leave it for now. This class is going to be an overlay of some literary ideas, because I think these, I believe they're 9 psukim we're going to do, are very literary in nature. And I think that I'm not going to say that, God is writing the book to be a literary work, but in using literary techniques, we, the reader, are brought in and caused to ask the questions we need to ask in order to have the answers that we need to have, or at least think about the important issues. Okay, so we're leaving it until the end, and we'll pick this up again. The first thing I'd like to talk about is irony. And I've just brought you the definition because that's what I do. A situation in which something which was intended to have a particular result has the opposite or very different result. We all pretty much know what irony is, but there it is as a definition. But secondarily, there's this other concept called dramatic irony. And again, I took that from the dictionary.com because I like the definition better. And that dramatic irony relates to plays or dramas, or in this case, the story. Irony that is inherent in speeches or a situation of a drama and is understood by the audience, but not grasped by the characters in the play. So we are basically in on the story. And the contention is that this entire story that we're about to read today of Uriah is one huge long story of dramatic irony, because somebody knows something that maybe the other person knows and maybe they don't, but we, the audience, know everything. Okay, so let's go. You're welcome. I didn't start at the beginning, but you are welcome to pipe in if you have questions now that we're getting into it, or if you have comments. But again, we're running because today I have a lot to do. But I'm happy for questions, or we can wait till the end. Or you can put them in the chat, and Elaine will notify me, and we'll stop and do that. Okay, so let's start with a psukim. Vishlach David el Yoav, and David sent obviously a messenger to Yoav, and Yoav is the general. Now his right-hand man is Uriah, and he's also a Gibor Chayil. He's also maybe not a general, maybe I don't know what terminology he has, but he's certainly a very important person in this war. So he sends to Yoav, Shalach Elai et Uriah Hachiti, send me Uriah. Now it's interesting that it doesn't say Vayomer, because that's the relationship they have. They're just very, very down to the point. Vishlach Yoav et Uriah el David. So Yoav did send Uriah to David. V'yavo Uriah elav, so he came to him. V'yishal David lishlom Yoav, ulishlom ha'am, ulishlom ha'milchama. And David asked Uriah about the peace of Yoav. I'm translating literally, and the peace of the nation and the peace of the war. So right away we have a super irony, right? Because war is nothing if not peace, right? No, there's nothing peaceful about war. So that's kind of a little irony right there. Also, so what is the reasoning? There's lishlom, lishlom, lishlom. Why does it keep repeating that? Anyone want to suggest? Okay, I see some heads shaking. The idea would be that this is all a ruse, right? David has a plan, what he wants to happen, but he has to cover for that plan. So he brings home Uriah, and since he's an important general, he wants to make it seem to Uriah that I'm really here so that I can get a report about what's going on at the front. So please tell me about what's going on with Yoav, what's going on with the nation, and what's going on with the war in general. And because the text uses 3 words, they could have just says like tell me about the war, right? And like Ma'im ha-milchama, or something very short. But he has a whole long conversation about each of these things, so that to cover for the idea, to make him think, because if most of the span of time is spent discussing the war, then that's the reason why he's coming. And then almost offhandedly, he says, Vayomer David l'Uriah, right, leveitcha, right, go down to your house. Right, he's finished, well, let's go, you're free to go. Verachatz raglecha, and wash your feet. Sorry. So what does that mean? Like, why would he be telling him to wash his feet? So I'm going to bring somebody other than the Malbim today. So Mitzudat David says, Urchat raglecha, hu kinui tashmish mita. It is a saying to mean have relations, obviously, with your wife. And then the middle part goes on to say that he would have given him a get, but the important part is the highlighted part. And he wanted to hide the idea that he wanted him to have relations with his wife. So he said, go wash your feet, go home. Like, you didn't have to spell it out for him, right? And then it says, ki haderech haya linsoa shuv bevo min hamilchama. So the idea is when they would come home, it wasn't just you got a get and you got home and you went, oh, I'm divorced from my wife. I can pick a different wife and we'll all just switch wives when we get home. No. The idea of the get that you gave to the wife in case people weren't away. They gave a get to the wife before in case the person died, so that when they came home, there would or if they didn't return and they were captive, there would be no issue of agunot, right? And the kids would be not mamzerim, and it would be fine. So the idea was not just you gave the get and then you or free and she's free and everything's, like a party. The idea is that you come home and you remarry your wife. And that was the idea that, you're here, your wife is here, go down. Okay, any questions to this point? Okay, so now he told Uriah to go watch.
Karyn?
Yes, darling.
Sorry. Yeah, so the guy comes back and the idea is to remarry his wife.
Yes.
What happens just by virtue of coming back to her?
Right, exactly.
Right. So what if he decides not to, or she decides not to?
I don't think that.
Sure that
I don't think that was an issue. I think that it was part of the get al tanai that you did have to come back to your wife. Like, again, I can research it for you if it's important, but it's not an important point for the sake of this story. So if you want, tell me after and I'll be happy to look into it. Okay, and then it says, V'yetze Uriah mi beit hamelech. He went out of the, thank you for remuting, by the way. He went out of the palace of the king. And now, you would expect something to happen, right? You would expect it either to say, Vayarad habayta, like he went home, or he didn't go home, right? So actually, Yonatan Grossman, he's a professor and a rabbi at Bar Ilan and other places, I'm sure. He's a very prominent scholar in Tanakh these days. He's alive now. And he calls this idea, what's about to happen, shvirat tzipiot. So you break your expectations. So what happens now that you have one of those two expectations, but instead we find this. We find the words v'tetzeh acharav mas'at hamelech. This mas'at hamelech, which could either be a feast of food came after him, maybe torches, maybe entourage, whatever it was. But the bottom line is the key is, no, I'm not going to, I don't have time to ask questions. The key is the word acharav. He left thinking he's going to go down to his house, but then all of a sudden he turns around and he goes, hold on, why is everyone following me, right? What is the purpose? Again, just like Rachatz, when she was washing on the roof, you could have told us that she was mitkadeshet mitumata at that time. So here also, if you can see my cursor, here when he's having this whole discussion, then he could have been given a present. In the English, it says the king gave him a present. The present followed him. And obviously when it says the present followed him, it doesn't mean the physical object, it means people carrying the present. So because it doesn't happen here and it happens here, Uriah now is going to think, why is he following me? Maybe these people coming with him are spies, but why is he spying on me? Wait a second. He was really adamant that I go down to my house and my wife. She's beautiful. I left her alone. You know what? Our balcony is just over by his balcony. Maybe something went on with him. So this is our idea to think, I believe, I forgot something. You can't, this is our hint to know that maybe Uriah knows. Maybe it's not any more dramatic irony. Maybe this is the breaking of dramatic irony and he will know from this point on, or maybe he still doesn't, and we'll see that in a second. I brought in this idea from literature, and why isn't it showing up, called Chekhov's gun, right? But it's not showing up for me. Is it showing up? There it is. And the idea is if you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter, it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. So similar to that idea is this idea of this Masat HaMelech, if this feast that's the movable feast, the feast that's following him, it's not exactly the same idea, but the idea is you should have heard about it again if it was important, but we never hear about it again. So therefore its importance must be exactly right here where it's located. So, so we get back to this idea that the thing that's following him, it's not the idea that it's following him, and doesn't even matter what it is. It matters that the people are following him to see and report back to the king whether he's actually gone to his wife. So the next few things that happen, okay, of course, my face, we have all of that there. Okay, so V'yishkav Uriah petach beit hamelech, and again, shvirat tzipiot. When you see the word V'yishkav, you're excited. Okay, maybe he made it back home, but nope, he didn't. He's sleeping outside the front door of the palace, and then it says et kol avdei adonav, right? He's with all of the servants of his master. Who is his master? Let's see. Velo yarad el beito, and he did not go down to his house. So it's clear that he basically refused the order of the king. The king said go down, and he said, no, I think I'll just stay here. Okay. Ve'yagidu leDavid lemor lo yarad Uriah el beito. So it was told to David saying Uriah did not go down. So interestingly, he didn't send messengers to go and bring Uriah to the castle because he was right there. So we are meant to believe, Vayomer David el Uriah, the next thing David says to Uriah, because basically he opened his front door, Uriah was more or less standing there. He was in front of all of the soldiers with him. And he said to Uriah, Hello, miderech ataba. Did you not come back? And again, the word hello reminds us of the hello that David may have said before. And I think that the text is using that purposefully to say that if these words are in David's mouth, then also those words are in David's mouth. Because if the report before was just, okay, she's Batsheva, but he's a king, he's thinking about, his treasury and whatever. So, but if the words were in his mouth, then we have to say that for sure he knew it was Batsheva. That wasn't a point that he just glossed over. Okay, so halomider ataba. And then he doesn't wait for an answer. He says immediately, Madua lo yaradata el beitecha. Why didn't you go down to your house? Now at this point, David could be like really angry, right? I mean, he needs him to go down to his house. But instead, we find the reasoning for this little discussion from the Malbim, back to the Malbim. So they told David, he didn't want to tell him, he didn't want to let Uriah know that he was angry because he wanted to continue the ruse, right? He didn't want to say, no, you really must go down because that's wrong, right? Al shevar al bekudato, that he did not fulfill the command of the king. So he thought maybe Uriah did know what was going on, and he wanted to figure this out by asking him the question that he asked there. And so therefore, it's usual that when you come back from a long trip, you go down and you obviously wash your feet and you see your wife. But that didn't happen. And so he just made it, as opposed to like, I'm mad at you, please go down, reminding him that that's the modus operandi of somebody who comes back from a trip. Okay, in a very calm voice, we think. Next. Okay, I didn't ask the question, but had I asked the question, what do you think Uriah would answer? I'm sure somebody would come up with something very interesting, but nevertheless, I put it there for you. And I started with Vayomer Uriah el David. Now, if you look at the two green sections, when people are talking to each other, there's an idea in Tanakh called Vayomer, right? So there are cases where somebody says Vayomer and then they say what they are going to say. The next person says Vayomer because you know the two people in the room, so therefore you just like calculate, this one says this and this one says this. There's an idea too that sometimes person A says Vayomer and then they say Vayomer B without somebody A responding, and then that could mean something as well, but that's not what we're into now. Then you could have, let's say, Vayomer David or Vayomer Uriah. And that's okay, a little bit more formal, but when you have Vayomer David el Uriah, Vayomer Uriah el David, that idea is you're saying, I am very formal. I am giving you a formalized answer that I have thought about, and it's not off the cuff. Okay, so it's a more important way of speaking. So the answer from Uriah is Ha'aron ve'Yisrael ve'Yehuda yoshvim basukot. The ark, Israel, Yehuda, the whole nation, as we said already, are sitting in Sukkot, sitting booths, right? Ve'adoni Yoav ve'avdei Adoni, and my master Yoav and his the servants of my master, al pnei hasadeh chonim, they're sleeping in the field. Ve'ani avo el beiti, and I'm going to go to my house. Lechol elishtot ulishkavi misha ishti. I'm going to go to my house and eat and drink and sleep with my wife. And obviously, this is like super irony, right? Like, wow. I mean, basically, he's saying, I'm refusing to do what you just did, right? And not only that, what you just did, and again, we're asking ourselves, is he really this tzaddik who really is dedicated to the war effort, and he's such a good patriot, and therefore he's going to be what's called aligned with his soldiers? Or does he know? And that's a question I'm leaving open for you. And does he know? And if he knows, then he had a choice to either play David's game, go down to his house, have relations with his wife, for the rest of his life, pretend that he didn't know what happened, and raise a child that likely wasn't his, and oh my gosh, right? Or he said, no, I'm a Gibor Chayil, and I will fight for my dignity, and I will give this answer, and this answer gets even better because now he says, right? Chayecha v'chay nafshecha. So on your life and on the life of your soul, if I would even consider doing this thing, and obviously you've considered doing it. Not only did you consider doing it, you did it with my wife, and I am a Gibor Chayil, and you didn't even stay home from war with your own wives. You chose a different person's wife, and that's my wife, and I know it, and I'm telling you I know it, but I can't explicitly tell you, but this should tell you. So what was happening in David's mind right now? So, come on, babe. The idea here is when he says Adoni Yoav Avdei Adoni, Perush Rashi on Kiddushim, he says Debezeh haya mored b'malchut. And with this, he was a treasonous towards the kingdom, the kingship. Shekaru leYoav Adoni, and he called his Yoav, his general, the master, and not the king, right? Lifnei hamelech, and he did so before the king. VeHatosafot sham pirshu, and so the Tosafot in that location, Dehayamer, that it was a rebellion or treason rather. Shekodem amar Adoni Yoav. So first he said Adoni Yoav, and then achar kach amar ve'avdei Adoni, and the servants of my master. And I'm sleeping, I'm in the camp with the servants of my master. Oh my gosh, like he meant the master Yoav, not the master my king, right? Al Shmo. Ve'od katvu sham dehaya mered b'ma shelo yarad leveito. There was also, of course, the mered, the treason, that he did not go down to his house, kasher tzivahu hamelech, that as the king told him. So all these things, there are other things that people bring in to say that he mered, that he didn't accept the gift that was given, that he did all of this in front of, in public. So the treason was compounded by not being in private, etc. So then we look here. I'd like to give some mitigating factors for David right now. So remember we had this idea here. If the pregnancy, there's no problem if Uri has relations and thinks the child is his, but David is still carrying the sin of the adultery, right? Even if this plan would have worked. So in theory, we have to be thinking to ourselves, if Uriah was killed in battle, if that was plan A for David, that would have been better for David because retroactively, she would have been not married. And therefore, he wouldn't have sinned. But yet, he chose to try to get Uriah to have relations and therefore cover it up so that he should not kill Uriah. I mean, I never read this anywhere, but to me, that's a ma'ala for him. Like he did something good. He didn't want to kill Uriah, but it's looking not good, right? It's looking like that's inevitably what's going to happen. Okay, so this is what happens next. You would think that maybe, let me check the time. Okay. So you would think that maybe this would be the time that he'd send him down to the battle. But no, Vayomer David el Uriah, and he says to Uriah, Shev bazeh, stay here. Gam hayom umachar eshlachecha. Stay here today, and tomorrow I will send you. And so that's the idea. Maybe he said, okay, so maybe Uriah is just focused on the war, and he can't relax because he's so focused on the war. So I'm going to give him another day, but I'm going to tell him that I'm sending him back so he can, like, that tension can leave him, and then he'll go down to his wife. So one more chance. But then it says, Vayeshev Uriah b'Yerushalayim. He was sitting in Yerushalayim. Vayom hahu umi malchorat. That day and the next day. Great. So what happened then? Vayikra lo David. David called him v'yochal lefanav, and he ate before him. And that's just a kind way of saying the king ate because the king must eat first. And then Uriah also ate. Vayesh, and he also drank. V'yishakrehu, and David made Uriah drunk, right? Because if the king says drink, you're going to drink. You have to drink, right? Well, except he's already refused. But he figured this was innocent. I'm just going to, I'm going to enjoy myself. And then it says Vayetze ba'erev. He went out in the night. And then again, Shvirat Tzipiot, you're thinking, oh, great. Now he's going to go back down to his house. So because we have the word Lishkov. Yes. But no, Lishkov b'mishkavo, still a good word. Im avdei adonav. So he still went back to avdei adonav. Ve'el beito lo yarad. And he didn't go back to his house. So there we have, it's kind of like David is all out of options here, right? So let's see what happens next. So this is the idea that I'm bringing in another literary idea, that Uriah is literarily a foil for David, and a foil, whoopsie, sorry, I'm trying to move my people. A foil is something or someone that makes another's good or bad qualities look more noticeable. So I'm sensing that you probably got that through what's been happening in the text. However, what do? I give you a chart because that's how I understand it better. And here is my chart. So we have Uriah and David. And if you remember, at the beginning of the story, we had all of these ideas, right? David was sending out, and he went, Yoav and his servants, he was sitting in Yerushalayim. It was La'et Erev. David was Al Mishkavo and Beit HaMelech, right? And he was wandering on the Beit HaMelech. And in contrast, just now, and I'm going to just go back for a second and show you the slide again, because let's see, here it is, right? You see all these highlighted terms, right? All of these terms are all the terms that we saw from David at the beginning, and here they are again. Excuse me. So we had the question of, here it seems like he's sending Yoav and Yoav's servants, but then here Uriah confirmed, yes, my master is not you, it's Uriah, it's Yoav, and I am aligned more with I consider myself an Eved of Yoav and not of you, king, right? I'm not listening to you, I'm listening to Yoav. And again, this Shalach, like David is sending people, but I think this is really the most dominant one. David was sitting in Yerushalayim and Uriah was sitting in Yerushalayim, and because they were both in Yerushalayim, the contrast is not because of Yerushalayim per se, but because they were both sitting there, they were both relaxing there, and he was choosing to act properly and he was choosing not to, right? And then La'ed Erev, we're going to deal with that hopefully in a minute, because I see we're clipping along here. And it says, David got off his bed, and the whole issue of bed and bayit, right? Are you going to be in your house doing the right thing with the right person, or are you going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? And also I highlighted Vayakam David, right? Because David, in theory, was supposed to rise to the occasion. I mean, here he's getting off the bed, but he was supposed to be the higher level person, right? But in the end, the irony of it all is that we know that he wasn't. But Be'el Beito lo yarad, like Uriah, never stooped to that level. He never went down both to his house and to the level of David. And not that he would even get to the level of David, because going to his wife would have been perfectly fine. But so I think that that's a very poignant choice of language. Poignant, maybe not the right word, but okay. So now we go back to this idea. And now anyone want to pipe up and tell me who wrote this? Okay. I would have thought somebody might have said Shakespeare, because yeah, sorry. Exactly. It sounds like Shakespeare, right? But indeed, it is not Shakespeare. It is this, I would say young man, but he's a dead man, Sir Walter Scott. And now I'm going to try to find you on my other computer, if I can get into it in 10 seconds, the discussion. Oopsie. I'm not going to do it. It's going to not work. It didn't work. Anyway, I'll tell it from Bald Pet. This Walter Scott wrote these lines are from a story called, I believe it's Marmion, right? And it's about a man who lusts after a woman, who creates a plan to have the fiance of that woman killed for treason, and in the end duels with him, not in dueling words, but in an actual duel. The person is vanquished, the person is, right, dies, is killed, is gone. But yet the woman in this story does not go to Marmion, I think it's I should figure it out. But anyway, does not go to the protagonist. Instead, she goes to a convent. But nevertheless, I think that there are similarities, and that's why part of the reason why I chose this to tell you. And obviously, it resonates with what's going on in our story, right? The imbroglio is basically a tangled web. So now, I'd like to go back for 1 minute and focus on this idea of Erev, and bring in one more idea from literature, and that is the idea of pathetic fallacy. Now, this does not align perfectly, but pathetic fallacy, and again, I can't get my other computer open, but basically what it is the idea that inanimate objects are given human feelings. So most commonly in Shakespeare, it is the weather that reflects the zeitgeist, or at least the feelings or the understanding of the protagonist. So for example, if you have a beautiful sunny day, you might have like lovers strolling in the park, right? That will go hand in hand. Whereas if you have a stormy day, I mean, Macbeth, I think is stormy, right? Then you're going to have the inner turmoil that's reflected inside the protagonist, right? So similarly, this is not an inanimate object. Erev is a time, right? But the question is, we have to ask ourselves, why at all was Erev important, right? It could have been morning, it could have been night. It didn't need to even be mentioned what time of day it is. So I'm going to suggest something, and this is one of my favorite commentaries in all of Tanakh, and it's from Radak, and it's on the idea Vahi Erev, Vahi Voker from Breshit, from the first parak of Breshit. Okay, and I did not bring the English, and I will tell you why if you stay after the recording is over. I have something, it is recording, right? Something like, I think it's called an Easter egg or a cookie, like, after you go to a movie and you stay for the credits, they show like outtakes or something. So I have an outtake, that's a good word. I have an outtake for after the recording is off. So, and you'll see why I didn't bring the English translation from Google. So let's see what this says. I'm trying to remove myself. Okay. So Erev. So what's the idea behind Erev? Ha'et achar biat shemesh nikra Erev. The time after the coming of the sun, i.e. the setting of the sun, is called Erev. Lashon irbuv v'hitchabrut hadvarim. So the time of mixing and commingling and joining of all the things. Mipnei shehu et hachoshech, because it's the time of darkness. V'yitarbu hadvarim shelo yakir adam v'lo yafred ben davar ledavar. So in all the things, when you look at something, it's mixed up. You can't tell the exact dimensions of it, the exact definition of where it is and where it isn't, and things get mixed up one to the other, right? You'll see two people walking and you won't know whether one is, Joe and one is Jane, or the other one is Jane and the other one is Joe. So because the evening divides the evening from the day, Nikret halayla erev, it's called erev, right? Because it fits what it does. Boker, Trilat Hayom, Yikred Boker. And morning, the beginning of the day, is called Boker. Lashon Drisha Uvikur, the language of seeking out and finding out and defining things. Ki baboker yitbaker kol davar le'or hayom. Because in morning, everything becomes clear and defined. Everything is clarified with the light that comes from the morning. Okay, so the question then is, not obviously, but in this whole situation, the Erev, it's not just, whether it's morning, night, or day, it's all Erev, because everything is mixed up, because nothing is clear to us, the reader, but certainly the idea is nothing is clear to David about what he should do and what he should not do, right? Nothing is morally clear, right? And even Uriah, where we ask, like, what should he have done? Should he have gone back to his wife? And then David wouldn't have been, not that we're blaming Uriah for David killing him at all, but then he wouldn't have had to have been killed, which we'll see. I'm sort of breaking, I should have said, what's the word? Cover your ears if you don't want to know what happens, but I think you know by now what's going to happen. So, so the idea is, we are confused. David, well, he was confused, right? The imbroglio, but I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger. And this is it. This would be my next slide, which I'm going to use to start the next slide. But interestingly, it starts the next session. Vahi baboker, and it was in the morning. V'yichtov David sefer al Yoav, and David wrote a book. In this case, it just means a note to Yoav. V'yishlach biyad Uriah, and he sent it in Uriah's hand. So two items of, like, is the baboker there, meaning now there's going to be clarity? Or is it yet another idea of irony, because really nothing is going to be clarified and nothing is going to be morally correct anyway? And then obviously the irony of Vishlach Biad Uriah, that Uriah is going to take that letter, whatever is going to be in it, but again, we all know what's in it, to Uriah, for Uriah to follow the instructions of that letter. Okay, and so finally, to sum up, if we're looking at this and we call the whole section the offensive, you know what, since we have time, why did I call it the offensive? Or any questions? Well, no, let's finish this first and then you can ask questions. I know you know, somebody out there knows. I will give you a cookie if you answer. I see somebody's face and I love the fact that I can see your face and your reaction, so I'm not going to say who it is, but thank you. Okay, I'm going to have to say it then. The offensive, it is like a military offensive. And obviously David, in his non-military state right now, he is trying to be on the offensive and create a situation where Uriah goes down to his house. Okay, so that's offensive number one. Offensive number two, anyone? Okay, I love you all, even though you're not participating. Yes, thank you, because I know somebody. Yes.
Yeah. So is this an opportunity to maybe give Uriah a chance to see what's in that letter?
Okay, maybe we can talk about that at the beginning of next session, because that's all about what's in the letter, et cetera, et cetera. So please remember your question for the next time. Okay?
Because it's kind of deceitful. I mean, it's almost not moral what's going on, what seems to be going on. It's almost like David is sending Uriah to his death.
Well, we'll see exactly what happens next time, right? So right now, again, I think that this is something that David did good. He brought him home because he did not want to take option B, which would have been good for David, because then he wouldn't be sinning. But yet he said, I'll accept the sin, but I don't want to kill a man, right? So he gave him that option, but twice, 2 opportunities, and it still didn't work. So that was the first offensive, trying to get him to go to his house. The second reference to offensive, it was offensive, Uriah's response to David. Uriah's Uriah's the way he spoke to David, the way he is treasonous, etc. So those 2 ideas are the offensive in this story. And so once again, if you have any questions that you don't want to talk about live on screen, I am happy if you want to take this down and write me anything you want to write to me. And I thank you all for coming. And I will stop. No, I can't stop sharing the screen because I want to show you something. But if anybody wants to leave and not see the screen, and then I will be happy to do that. So again, thank you. I'm going to stop recording. I am recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where can we hear the recording?
That's a question for Elaine Genisov. Do you have an answer, Elaine?
I got it from the office last time, the link.
Is it just for members? Elaine? Is it just for members?
Is it just for members?
Oh, okay.
So